Hi, it's Elliot again, and we are continuing with our test 1 revision for the management accounting and finance paper which you wrote on the 19th of March 2019. In this session, we are going to be focusing on the revision of question 9, which was the last requirement in this assessment. So question 9, you are asked to advise the company on what factor they should have considered when determining the dividend to be paid for the 2018 year. Your answer should also include a discussion of the firm's general dividend policy issues and considerations. So let's break down this required so that we really get clarity on what you expected to have covered in your solution. So the first thing was the word advice. So as in English word, we are asked to give someone advice. The expectation is you are giving them a position with regards to something. So ultimately, when someone reads through your answer, they need to see you giving them a suggestion on how they should proceed. So the question is, I'm advising the company on what? On factors they should have considered. So that's very interesting. You're advising the company on factors they should have considered. So here, this question is very practical. Imagine a consultant engaged by a company and they say, my friend, we want to make this decision. Can you just give us some insights on factors that you should consider in this decision? So what decision does this company want to make? They want to make a deal on whether they should pay a dividend for the 2018 financial year. So ultimately, whatever factor that I consider, they should be practical. But what do I mean by practical? They should be based on facts in the scenario. So in this case, the required is not asked you to say, my friend, can I have some dividend policy model that can be used? So the theories around dividend policies. But this company or PMHA want to make a dividend decision. So based on the information that they provided you, can you give them factors or key considerations that they should have made in deciding whether or not they should pay a dividend? And in that discussion, we should then touch on dividend policy issues and consideration. So these guys are saying it's not really just about this once-off dividend payment, but we also need to take cognizance of the fact that ultimately we need to develop a dividend policy that we need to use going forward. So now that you have been given this question, you then need to ask myself, how best can I structure my advice in terms of assisting the company coming up with a dividend policy or decision on whether to pay a dividend? So then ask yourself, so from the policies that you did, or from the knowledge from the topic that you did on dividend policies, what are some of the key subheadings that come through, or principles that come into play whenever a company want to decide whether or not to pay a dividend? Number one, definitely dividends are paid out of profits. So the key factor to consider is that the company have the profits to be able to pay out a dividend. So here I'm planning out my answer. Then number two, whenever a company wants to pay out a dividend, they need to consider who are our shareholders. Normally what you call the clientele effects. So if I look at my shareholder profile, is it going to inform my decision on whether or not I'm going to pay out a dividend? Then three, I also need to consider historically, what have I always done? But definitely, normally investors look at what you have done in your previous years, and that should also inform their expectations for you going forward. Then, as a key factor to consider, I need to consider the taxation effect. So if I pay out a dividend, if I don't pay out a dividend, what are the taxation implications? Then 5, you should also then consider dividend from the principles you learned. What is the information content of dividends? So here you're planning. to say, when I then do my response, what are the things I'm going to talk about? And lastly, there are certain things that you will not be able to necessarily put within these subheadings. And normally just say you are also supposed to look at other considerations. So you are planning. And the moment I've got this structure, it means I've got 6 quadrants and I'm going to be looking for 20 marks. So hypothetically, to earn 18 marks, if I have 3 points under each and every subcategory, I'm already on 18. And 18 out of 19, I'm over 90% of the marks available. So now looking at profitability, we don't expect you to write a theoretical answer to say, okay, PMHO should consider the profitability of the business in deciding whether or not to pay out a dividend. We expect you to actually go back to the financial figures if you are provided. So let's go to our scenario. Are we given any information around the financial performance? So we are told PMHO's price earnings ratio is 20.34, earnings yield 4.92%, and dividend yield 3.64%. So what is this telling us about the company's profitability? So the PE ratio, 20.34. This is quite high, which shows that maybe the company, in terms of the price is very high, because if you look at the price earnings ratio, it indicates the market's perception around the future prospects of the company. So it may show that investors have got high regard for this company. Then if you look at earnings yield, 4.92%. That's also quite high, especially in comparison to the dividend yield. To say these guys, it appears that all along, they always pay a high dividend in comparison to the earnings that they are earning. So management, they have to consider this profile in making their decision on whether or not they are going to pay a dividend. Is the company profitable? So from these ratios, you can say profitability looks to be okay. Then the next thing is, I now need to look at the next category we talked about is, who are my shareholders? So in looking at my shareholders, you've been given this profile. Your founding shareholder 31.65%, mutual funds, legal and general insurance funds. And the founders of the company are independently wealthy and have no need for dividends. So already my point, I'm going to say the founding shareholders, based on the information provided, do not need dividend. Therefore, effectively, they prefer capital growth to a dividend. I'm writing in my analysis. Then what about the pension funds, the unit trust, etc.? So these guys typically need income to finance their day-to-day operating expenses. And you find that they ordinarily prefer a dividend. So I'm going to write that. Therefore, then I conclude, say, on the investor, when I look at the shareholder profile, and normally from a shareholder, we talk about majority rules. So those who get a majority stake, what do they prefer? So maybe the founding shareholders with the controlling stake. And in this case, they prefer a dividend. And I'm going to comment that in my advice. Say, looking at the shareholders, these guys would appear to prefer payment of would rather prefer capital growth as compared to a payment of a dividend. Then I move on with the case study. One of the things that we said we need to look at in terms of the subheadings in our solution is historical trends. What has been the historical trend around payment of dividend? And this is where this information becomes relevant. So we are given information from 2011 up to 2018. And you can see from this information, almost every year, the company has paid out a dividend. So the fact that we have always paid out a dividend, one, it means shareholders or the market now is an expectation that we pay a dividend. That's one. Then two, over the years, has there been a constant dividend? And I'm sure you can see from the information provided, $10.50 in 2011, 27, but if we then go to 2018, 62, 32. So it means the dividend has been growing. So what does this mean in terms of advice? So it means the market expects PMHO to continue paying out a dividend. So it means that if this year we fail to pay a dividend, how is the market going to take it? So I'm going to raise a point that it might signal or send signal that the company is now struggling. So the information, so it can then be linked to your subheading around information content of a dividend. And then you can also mention as a point, in analyzing this historical trend, you are not supposed to take into account the special dividends. Why? Because these are normally taken as once-off dividend. And the idea of special dividends is not to create shareholder expectation or market expectation to say this is going to recur. So that's another valid point you would raise under in evaluating historical trends. Then another item we talked about was information content of dividends. So here are now saying, now looking at the historical trend, if we stop paying, let's say this year we don't pay a dividend, what is the market going to perceive? They may perceive that the company is now struggling. That's a point you are raising. Or if this year we don't have a growth in the dividend payment, again the market may perceive that we are not paying. So here under this subheading, you can say we may need to consider continuing paying a dividend for this year, given the information content of the dividend. Then another subcategory that I talked about was other consideration. So here I'm looking at the case study in its entirety. What other information have I been told which may assist us in making decision whether or not to pay out a dividend? So if I find, for example, as a consideration, the company announced a share buyback program. And this year was announced on 23 January 2019. And there was this offer price which we meant. So if we buy back shares, then we pay back, and we pay a dividend. What's going to happen to the capital structure? It means if we buy back shares, we pay out a dividend, we are reducing the equity component. So a key factor to consider is, are we still going to achieve maybe PMHL's desired capital structure if we do pay out a dividend in light of the share buyback program? Interesting. Then, if you again go through the rest of the case study, I think some of the issues that were being raised were around the current economic landscape in which PMHL has been operating in. So looking at that economic environment, the question is, should PMHL pay out a dividend? It's a consideration. Then another item consideration is, if you look at PMHL, they are looking to expand into the South African market. So someone could ask, how are we going to fund that expansion? Should we not be considered not paying out a dividend and then using internal resources to fund that, the expansion strategy? Then we are also looking at acquisition of First Diamond Insurance Company. Again, it's going to require funding. So it's coming through as another consideration that I'm making on whether or not PMHL should be paying out a dividend. So I'm sure, as you can see in my discussion, I'm really going through the information in the case study and discussing how it impacts on the decision on whether PMHL should pay out a dividend. So I'll briefly go to some of the common pitfalls we noticed. So in most of our scripts that we marked, we know that as students, you focus on writing theories on dividend. So some of you talked about the bird in the hand theory. Then you'd go to town explaining how the bird in the hand theory works. But the question was, from an advice perspective, what is the relevance of that theory? So the client doesn't ask you to tell them about the theories that can be used when coming up with a dividend policy decision. Or others would go through the Modiglian assumption that dividends are irrelevant. But from an advice, what are you saying? You have not yet said anything. Or others would then say, write a theoretical that generally we need to assess our shareholder base. But then you then did not go on to apply this to the information on PMH's shareholder profile. So the most important takeaway from this question that we want to emphasize to you is, be clear on what the required is asked you to do. You have been asked to give advice. So go back and read your script. Did you give advice? Did you link to the information in the case study? Did you link to your information that you know, or principles that you know, or factors that are considered when you're making a dividend decision? And with those three, you should have been able then to present a logical argument around what management should consider in determining whether a dividend should be paid. So you're going to realize that most of you did not earn this communication skills mark for the simple reason that you did not present a logical argument, but you went more the route of theory dumping, no application at all. So I hope this has been a very important lesson for any future questions that you do. And you can see that in my model here, or in the revision for question 3 that we did, I first of all came up with a structure or subheading that I then used to come up with my solution points, which guided my discussion with referencing back to the information in the case study. So with that said, I hope you are already planning now to say, now after this reflection, going forward, what do you need to do better? So the idea here is, maybe going forward, you are never going to get a question which is exactly like this. But I want you to focus more on the thought process that I applied to be able to come up with valid solution points to address this required, which is the key thing that you need to learn, and also applying critical thinking skills. So once again, thank you very much for taking time to watch through this revision recording on required 7 from your test 1. Thank you.